On Earth Day 2007, Mayor Bloomberg announced PlaNYC, which is the city's long-range plan and sustainability initiative for New York. The idea was, what are we going to be able to do to ensure that we continue to grow and thrive in the years ahead? And that had some important implications for how we plan and design our city.
You know, cities have to lead by example. We are the problem. We're where the people live. We generate 80% of the greenhouse gases, so we can't just sit around and wait for others to do it.
We are now at 8,400,000 people, and we expect to grow to 9.1 million people by 2030.
I think that New Yorkers are really hungry for public space, and so to be able to provide that, I think, is a huge quality of life improvement for people who live, work, and play here.
So our job is to look comprehensively at land use in the city. And that means rethinking mobility, providing alternatives to the automobile, and creating access to everyone for jobs, housing, work, through a bikeable, walkable city.
The world that we occupy every day is designed. For the most part, we're not in the natural world, but it hasn't always been designed with human behavior and human health in mind.
Actually, designers have some influence on that. And we'd always been in the business of making things more convenient and less mobile, and more elevators, and so people had to do less. The health department worked with us, say, well, we ought to change that thinking. Let's try to get people moving more.
Any change in the design of buildings or streets or neighborhoods, which makes it easier for people to simply walk, is going to be health promoting for the entire population.
We have actually invested and put down on the streets of New York in the last 3 years alone 250 miles of on-street bike lanes. And what we've done is taken innovative designs borrowed from other cities and implemented them on the streets of New York. So, for example, on 8th and 9th Avenue in Manhattan, we actually flipped the traditional bike lane and the parking lane. That investment strategy alone has paid huge dividends on the safety front. In fact, every single time we put down a protected bike lane, we see injuries for all users go down some 50%.
One of the goals of PlaNYC was to provide a recreational open space within 10 minutes of every residence, because it's been pretty much established that if people have a small park, and it doesn't need to be large, any open recreation space within 10 minutes, they will use it.
We have 6,000 miles of streets in New York City, and I look at our streets as some of the most valuable public space. So Mayor Bloomberg asked us to see what we could do to improve traffic. And what we did was take a look at who's using these streets and how are they using them. And as it turned out, in Times Square, 90% of the pedestrians that were there were only given 10% of the street space, and yet 90% of that space was allocated to cars.
There were a lot of tourists here before too, but there was a lot more traffic going down. So this is a very different feel. It's very nice.
So once we flipped that and actually made that area safe for pedestrians, we were actually able to improve the flow of traffic. We were able to create a world-class space for people to enjoy the Great White Way. People don't go to Times Square to watch the traffic. People go to Times Square to enjoy the incredible lights, camera, action that's there.
Even in the 20-odd years that I've lived here, become a much more walkable city. There are now plazas and street trees and bike lanes and sidewalk cafes that have emerged over the last decades.
The 5 boroughs are very different, and we want to grow in those neighborhoods without changing their character. And the goal, of course, is to create complete neighborhoods, neighborhoods of choice, where you have jobs, housing, open space, retail, within a walkable, bikeable distance.
What works here in many cases, not all, but in many cases will work elsewhere, and we'd love to have people copy us in the same ways we'd love to get their ideas and apply them here if applicable.
What do we need to do to ensure that a 9 million person New York City is better than an 8 million person New York City is today? It's an iterative process. We are constantly searching for the great ideas that other cities have, and so I think it's wonderful that cities are coming together to say, how do we make our cities as great and as green and as sustainable as they can be?
Sustainability is something that makes fiscal sense, and it makes sense for our lives going forward. The air we breathe, the water we drink, the future we leave our kids.